This is the Bible Touchstone. Here we're going to take a look at preterism, and I'm going to give some thoughts and some comments, and we're going to make some practical applications. Basically, we're going to be distinguishing a preterist alternative to the full preterist position. Now, my position is nothing really new or novel. We're going to see that it fits well within the boundaries of the Westminster Confession of Faith. We're going to be talking about certain themes here, at least the final state affair of man after death, and the judgment, or what we call the last judgment, or the final judgment. And we're going to we'll take a look at some texts here. We're going to look and see what the full preterist position is, and then we're going to give an alternative viewpoint. Let's take a look at some texts here. Matthew chapter 16, let's take a look at the last two verses, verses 27 and 28. For the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward every man according to his works. Verily I say unto you, there be some standing here which shall not taste of death, till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And of course, the full preterist position is that those to whom Jesus spoke, those that were standing there among him, there would be some of them that did not physically die before they saw him come into his kingdom and come into the glory of his Father and reward every man according to his works. Now, when they see reward every man according to his works, they hold that that must mean the judgment, the final judgment. There's only one judgment, so it must be one event. But from the Reformed position, we want to say, wait, not so fast. Let's take a look at what he means by coming to his kingdom. By coming to his kingdom, we see it's a coming, but it's not a coming in judgment to Jerusalem in AD 70. We don't get that from this text. It's a coming into his kingdom. It's when the Ancient of Days assumed his position on the right hand of God. That's when he ascended. This is before AD 70, and it did happen before the judgment of Jerusalem, but of course before all of them died. Some of them were still standing there and did not taste of death before they saw that happen. What about this reward every man according to their works? Well, certainly we see that there is a dividing of the sheep and the goats before, and they're reserved unto judgment afterwards. There's a judgment that they're reserved unto. The wicked, they go into a place of eternal damnation. But they're still suffering. They're still far off from those who are in Abraham's bosom, those who are in paradise. See, when we look at the Westminster Confession of Faith, we see that when a person, their physical body dies and it meets dust and corruption, we see that their soul or their spirit returns to God who gave it to begin with. And what happens after that? Well, the souls of the righteous, those who are made righteous and made perfect, they are reserved on one hand of Christ, and they are going to be reserved for their eternal inheritance, which was prepared before them, before the foundation of the world. And those who are on the other hand, well, those are the goats. They are the reprobate. They are reserved for eternal damnation. Now, when we take a look at the Westminster Confession of Faith, we see that there is actually a final judgment after that. So, where is this judgment that says they're righteous or not righteous? And I thought that's what the last judgment's all about. Where is this concept of accountability? Where does it come from? Well, we see this in Matthew chapter 24 and 25. There's a lot of parables given, and some are given unto weeping and gnashing of teeth, and some servants are cast into outer darkness and those kind of things. But let's backtrack a little bit. Let's look at Matthew chapter 24. Let's look in verse 30. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Now, I agree with the full preterist that this applies to a local event within the first century in the coming judgment of Jerusalem. But the language here does not match Christ coming into the glory of his Father and coming into his kingdom. This is talking about a coming or a sign of his coming when he's in heaven and his angels coming to gather elect. This isn't the same thing we read about in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 where it says, Christ shall descend from heaven to gather his people. This is talking about a local event, or at least the remnant of Israel. We read about this in the prophets. We read about this in Paul. This is where the lost tribes are gathered into a revivified nation, and this, of course, is within the context of the judgment of Jerusalem in the end of the age. So this is around AD 70, this kind of stuff. But just because you see the keywords Son of Man and heaven, you have to actually see that it's distinguished between him coming into heaven and a sign of him coming from heaven, and that kind of language here. And in verse 31, he shall send his angels with the great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather his elect from the four winds. So it's not necessarily the same thing as him actually descending from heaven. It's different language than 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 17, 18. But when we talk to full-preterists, they say, well, just look at these certain key words, abstract it, and even though it's saying something different, the language is so similar that it must be one event. So to summarize, when Jesus says that he's going to reward every man according to his works, we see that this happens even before the judgment. Some are rewarded either to be put on the one hand, that is those made perfect and righteous, their souls waiting for their bodies to be redeemed, and then those who are reserved for, in torment, reserved for everlasting damnation. Now the end of what they're waiting for is still to come, but they're rewarded either in one place in Abraham's bosom, and in one hand, it's going to be reserved in torments. So this could be your heaven and hell. One goes to behold the face and the glory of God because they're made perfect enough to do so. But then on the other hand, those reprobates, those goats, they're actually reserved for everlasting destruction. And we'll see this in Matthew chapter 25 when we look at certain parables here.